Look, they're all dressed nice. I like really went lazy today, and I just came to work clothes.
Just throwing a shirt. Okay, so you want us to focus on planting design, right? Or do you want, in general, the landscape design? Because there's so many.
Oh my gosh, so many people are talking.
So many things we can go into.
Something simple. That these.
30 seconds.
You want to go through like different design styles in planting?
Form composition.
Yes.
Okay.
Draw curvilinear and circular. Radial 45.
What? Rectilinear? That's all you got? Okay, so I'm gonna draw whatever. I'm gonna draw out a house. We're gonna say we have a house. Check that out. Wow. You guys like that? House. Good stuff.
It's
so,
like my parents.
When it comes to site design or landscape design, landscape architecture, it's similar to any other types of design that you do. I mean, all design has similar aspects in what looks good, what doesn't look good, how you do things with it. So we're going to talk. It's hard for us to do this in 5-10 minutes, considering it's years of stuff that you can study on it. But we'll do as basic as we can. So when it comes down to site design itself, something that you want to focus on is form composition. And form composition, it just bases everything off of certain forms. So these types of form compositions could be rectilinear, circular, 45-degree, radial, and there are a couple different ones that you mainly focus on, and everything kind of falls under that category. And then you can mix them as you go, but it's good to kind of stay in one facet of it. So I'm trying to think of the best way to go about, because it's such a quick thing.
No one cares.
If you guys have any questions, ask, because this is hard. It's hard to consolidate. I don't know how to consolidate.
Just never ask Paul.
I won't troll you. It's a real question.
All right, go for it.
All right.
Any other questions?
So, would it be appropriate to do something that's kind of like in waves? What I mean is, like, have plants and other things designed in a fashionable wave. Like, here's a row, and then a row that's even bigger, and a row that's even bigger than that. Or is that aesthetically not pleasing?
It depends on what you're doing. So you're talking about, let's say, you have a row of little, like, small perennials or something, right? Like this high, that you're talking about. And then you're saying you want a bigger row behind it, right? So you can do stuff like that, but that's when you're getting more into formal plantings. And it has to fit right with the style of the house, the style of what you're designing, but it keeps everything formal. So if you think about, like, some of those big fancy English gardens, like if you go to Europe, they have their gardens where they've got their pathways, and then the whole thing is just lined with boxwoods.
Yes.
Right? And then you can do other larger trees and stuff in here, but everything's lined, and you can do smaller perennials. That comes into more formal aspects, because everything is kept nice and neat and in those lines.
Okay. How do you know when the point is to stop putting in trees and shrubs and flowers and stuff? Is there like a limit?
It depends on what you're going for. So we can talk about planting design in just a minute, and we'll get to that. So starting out, very basic ideas here. Form composition. Keep it simple with what you're doing. If you're starting, so let's say if you're doing rectilinear. So rectilinear, obviously rectangles or squares is kind of what you're going for. So if you're doing rectilinear, stay with rectilinear if you're coming in here. So let's say you got yourself a porch, right? Now you can come down and you can just be straight here to the sidewalk, but that's really stupid, and that's how 99% of everything in America happens. But what you want to do with landscapes is people just they just put a yard there, and they don't know how to use it. They don't know how to maintain it right. They don't know how to design it to where it's actually functional. But what's nice is if you can come through and you can make things and have it. Make it so your landscape is kind of a journey as you go through it. And as cheesy as that sounds, it's actually kind of how it feels. So if you're able to come through, let's say you take, your sidewalk here, and then you come down, and those are steps up, say each steps. And then you have plantings on either side, or plantings throughout. That changes the whole dynamic of your house. If somebody's walking through, this now becomes a sight line that they want to look to, and it intrigues them to come and walk through, and it slows down life for a little bit because you're able to soften up the house. It's not just stark, and it's not the functionality aspect of, I want this sidewalk here just so I can walk to the door and walk back. It's landscape is a lot about the emotions and how you feel as you're working with plants and working with nature. So try to be a little adventurous with it. And then, like I said, stick with what you're doing. If you're doing, like we said, there's different types of design. Curvilinear, for instance. A lot of times plant beds look really good with curvilinear. So curvilinear is obviously just curves. But make sure that they're not like something crappy like that. So can you see the difference between nice curves and nasty curves?
So you don't want
Can
that.
everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Curvilinear, keep it with nice curves.
I was thinking.
You don't
Right?
want a straight line.
Yeah, so there are problems with static lines, sharp lines. When you have a nice curve, it's got great emotion to it, and it helps edge out things better.
Like a music composition.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Okay, you guys talk for a minute, because I'm trying to
You're doing
consolidate
great.
So usually with
2
planting,
years of stuff in there.
the minimum you want between like a house and then like this is the lawn, this is the flower bed or whatever. The minimum you want is 3 feet, and it's a fence and everything. So let's just say planting strategies. You want to block out your neighbors.
Screening.
Screening. So if you have
Yeah.
some neighbors back there,
Or you want a windbreak or
And usually
Like
you're
in
screening
Idaho,
with
you want
evergreen
one.
plants such as like spruces, pines,
yeah,
stuff
there's
like that.
and then I think there is an AutoCAD. There's the symbols. Evergreen is like stuff that never loses.
so
never
you can
changes.
plant outside your setback anything you want, okay?
And the symbols are like that, and then there's deciduous, which can be some type of circle, and then shrubs, which are just the smaller ones. Usually your evergreens, which are the ones that don't lose their needles and stuff, you put in the back because they'll be there all year round and they'll screen it. And they're bigger. You always like how he was talking about with formal stuff, you want the bigger stuff in the back, smaller stuff in the front. It's how it is with curvilinear in any strategy. You put big stuff in the back, and if it's curvilinear design, you just kind of mix it up. So there's background, which is usually your evergreen. Yeah, I know.
Oh, it's bad.
Just pretend it's nice.
We're moving into planting design now.
So then there's framework, which is like, this is your sidewalk, the sidewalk that Garrett had. You kind of want to like frame stuff. You can frame like your front door by putting the plants here. You can frame like if you have a water feature right here, use 2 trees, kind of frame it. What else is there?
Frame. Yeah, actually, you got it.
Framework just like
Oh,
draws
does it-
your eye to something and holds
So-
your eyes into something.
And it also helps, so if you're looking at a house plan, right, so let's see if I can draw. We have ourselves a house, right? So if you're looking at this house, there's a lot of just raw material that's it's just very stark. Framework a lot of times helps to soften things up. So if you want to plant a tree, instead of just slapping one in the middle of the yard, take a look at the framework of the house, like where it's at, and maybe you want a tree that comes up in front and helps to soften up the house itself. Kind of tucks the house a little bit behind. It makes it just a softer feel, more inviting, and just nicer all around. So framework is a lot of that. Deciduous trees, trees that lose their leaves, are great for your framework, being able to do things like that.
It's like
You can have
putting makeup on a girl.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you have like a big garage on the side of your house, you don't want to focus on the garage.
I
you
need a
wanna,
lot
like,
of
frame
framework.
that. You can frame this part of the house that draws the eye there. The prettier side of the house.
Also, a lot of the framework with the deciduous trees, they're gonna be like bigger ones you put like closer to patios to like give it shade in the summertime, and to let the sun through in the wintertime because there's gonna be no leaves on this.
And there are a lot of benefits. We're throwing a lot of information at you right now, but there's a lot of benefits to deciduous trees even being planted next to houses and stuff, because in the summer it blocks all the sun
solar
from hitting
passive.
it. But then once the leaves fall in the winter, it collects the sun, and so it helps to heat up the house during winter. So you can really, plan things right to help for energy efficiency.
Yeah, it's a passive solar design for architecture. We use plants for stuff like that.
So there's a lot to think about with it, but so these are kind of what we talked about. So background is obviously the things that are big, the things that stop your eye. You want things you want to stop your eye. If you just have big, vast, open spaces, you don't feel enclosed. When you're doing a landscape, it's a lot like building a house in the sense of it's outdoor rooms is what you're creating. You're trying to create spaces. And the way you do that is you build walls and roofs and everything out of different materials, whether it's plants that create a wall or pergolas or arbors that create an overhead plane, and it makes you feel, even though it's not a full roof, it makes it feel like it's enclosed space. It makes it feel like it's a room. That's what you're doing when you're doing landscaping, is making rooms, additions into the yard. But when you're doing the planting design, so background framework, infill is like your medium. So if you think about this in big, medium, small, then it's a good way to remember it. So these are your big, here's your medium, and here's your small. And focal points can kind of vary throughout that. But when you're planting, so let's say you have a planting bed back here, right? So you're going to want to stop your eye and you're going to do your backgrounds, right? So let's say we have some backgrounds. So if you're standing here, you're looking that way, stops your eye. That's your big. And then your medium is your infill. And a lot of times infill isn't showy at all. It's just like your nice green shrubs, things that if you sat it alone, you'd be like, that's, you know, kind of an ugly plant. But it works really well when doing it, incorporating it into a design. So you come in with your mediums, and you can do that to just make it feel more full. And then you come in with your accents and your small around these areas that show more, because you wouldn't want to put anything small behind anything big. So it sets a good, kind of like what you were talking about, where you have small, medium, big. You were talking about in a very formal setting, which is hard to do, but you can do it, and it looks really good. But it's kind of that idea, small, medium, tall, as you're going throughout these things. And then you'd have like your deciduous framework or something here that's up over top. So that's a very, very basic idea of what you're doing with planting design. And how I was doing it in odd numbers always look better. If you look at something, if you look at trees and there's 4 of them, you automatically split them up in your head. You look at it and you split it up into symmetry, or you're trying to figure it out. But if there's odd numbers, psychologically, you just look at it and it looks like one big group.
Just like boy bands.
Just like boy bands.
Boy bands always 3 or 5.
So, did that make any sense?
Yes.
Do you guys have any questions about any of that? Yeah.
When you're doing your site plan and everything, what is the biggest mistake people make?
Eric, I think you should take this one.
Oh, okay, well, functionality. Basically, when you're making your form composition, you want to make it functional. So you don't want to just be like, oh, they have to walk this way in all sorts of different ways. So it depends on kind of like a family needs analysis is what we usually do. We find out what they want. So if they want a pool, if they want a trampoline, if they want a fire pit, then you're going to map out those areas on the house. So if you had like, this is weird now, but if you had like a fire pit right here, and then they wanted like some other like big seating area in the back with like a table and the chairs and stuff. So you want to make it so there's easy flow from one area over to the other area. So that's like one of the main things that people mess up with. And then when starting out with your drawing, you want to just take in like key things, like if there's like noisy neighbors and you want to make sure that you want to like, okay, we're going to screen them with here with like a lot of evergreens on this side. And so you want to take care of like the problem areas first, and then figure out the functionality, making it so there's easy flow from one area to the other.
And you also like the location of the stuff. If you're going to have a grill, you're usually going to want it outside.
Yeah.
Your back door, you're not going to put it like on the
Yeah, you
side
don't want to have to walk.
Yeah, no
all the way around
kidding.
your
and
house.
stuff like that. Or like if you have a garden,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if you're not good at gardening, you'll hide it. But if you like gardening, you'll put it closer to the kitchen and have like a herb garden.
Or if you have like a dog, then it might be kind of messy, so you kind of want to put that like in the back area that people aren't going to see all the time.
You're not going to put the dog by the fire pit because of smell.
Yeah, or
And
burn.
something that we see with it too is in the functionality aspect is look at your space. If you design something in, you're like, that looks awesome. Look at the different areas. Does it make sense that it's there? You know, if you're like, oh, I want to do a planting bed that comes over here, right? And you have plants here to help screen the neighbors. But then this is just dead grass space. It's like, what's it used for? All you're doing is pulling out your mower, pulling out a weed whacker to go out there and do nothing besides maintain it because it's not functional, it doesn't work. Or people would like try to put a nice little patio back here or something, which is great if there's access to it, if it flows there, if there's something that draws them back there. A lot of times people will drop in something that will never be used, and they just spent $50,000 on putting this nice patio back somewhere that people walk on maybe once a year.
Yeah.
So think about, will it be used? How will it be used? How can I access it? Are there any dead zones? So,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else? Mitch, working hard?
No, Morgan taught me all this. I really
yeah.
That's
need
what I
it.
figured. Well, Garrett taught me that, so.
Yeah, I taught her.
Done.
Sweet.
All right, cool.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah, what's
Oh.
up?
Do they like? What can you tell us about like zoning? I guess like as far as like, because they have the dead zones like the farthest out, right? And then as it gets closer to the house, aren't there like a certain amount of zones that you're like planting certain kind of plants in, like plants that need more care, or, like closer?
Yeah, there's like plants that have shade issues and stuff. I don't think
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
So it just completely depends.
Or climate
There's a lot of
issues and
variables
stuff.
with that. That would make sense if that's something if you're not really big into gardening or anything or whatever, you know what I mean, or the client isn't. And then if there's anything that needs to be maintained, put it a little bit closer. They remember about it. They go. They take care of it.
Usually things that are like harder to maintain are going to be like more like focal point things, like things that people want to see. So obviously you're going to put those closer to a patio, closer to the house, so they can actually see them all the time. Whereas things are like really far away, they're just like evergreens, which you don't really need to maintain a whole lot of.
Super low maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully that kind of helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot involved,
There's
but
there's a ton involved.
I think if they have a direction to go,
Okay.
I think this was helpful, wasn't it? Somewhat.
Any compliments?
Like
Yeah.
knowledge. to
Wonderful,
find those.
beautiful drawings.
Compliments, money, food, we take all.
If you have questions, just ask it.
And I'll direct you to Kirk.
And